Alright, so if you're in the market for a new high refresh rate 1440p gaming monitor, then this one should definitely be towards the top of your list, the new LG 27GP850. It's 27 inches, has a super clean design, a surprisingly good motion blur reduction mode, and a refresh rate of 165Hz that can easily be overclocked up to 180Hz. But how does it compare to the new 1440p 240Hz options out there, and how fast actually is that new nano IPS panel? Well, spoiler alert, it's really good. This is one of the best 1440p monitors on the market in my opinion, and gets a really strong recommendation from me, but there are definitely a lot of things that you should know before picking it up, so let's take a look. I think most of us can agree that something that LG are clearly leading the gaming monitor market on is design, and I understand that a lot of this comes down to brand identity and recognition, but I just really enjoy that minimal, sharp looking exterior on ultra gear gaming monitors. Ergonomically, they're quite good too, but I have a couple of gripes with this one. Firstly, the legs on the stand might bother some users out there as it does extend from the base quite a bit. I personally found my mouse a little bit closer than I'd like while sitting at my comfortable viewing distance, so just keep that in mind. As you'd expect, the monitor is VESA 100x100 compatible though, so using it with a monitor arm won't be an issue. The second gripe is also with the stand. I just wish there was a bit more height adjustability, because at the moment the lower setting isn't actually that low. The ports are pretty straightforward, a single DisplayPort 1.4, two HDMI 2.0 and two USB 3.1 pass-through. This is a FreeSync premium display with G-Sync compatibility all the way up to 180Hz, and it's definitely great to see that becoming more of a standard feature in today's gaming monitors. Now, those small trade-offs earlier that I mentioned with the stand easily fade away when you take a look at the monitor's actual performance. The 27GP850 comes out of the box with a refresh rate of 165Hz, but that can easily be bumped up to 180Hz by selecting overclock through the monitor's menu settings, which are navigated really easily with a small joystick. Then you just need to head over to your desktop display settings and select 180Hz. So really, this makes the 27GP850 almost a one-size-fits-all display. I mean, it's not quite there yet, but it's really close at the $500 price point. The 180Hz feels super quick in competitive high refresh rate titles, and the 1440p resolution means that single player titles and general desktop use are going to be a lot more enjoyable than on a 1080p display. And I mentioned this in my review of the 1440p 240Hz FI27QX from Aorus as well, but in battle royale games like Warzone and Apex, those extra pixels do actually help with player visibility as well. Especially if you play with anti-aliasing off, which most competitive players do, there's a lot less of that aliasing and shimmering effect from objects that can get quite a bit distracting. And at 27 inches, I feel that 1440p is pretty much ideal in terms of pixel density. Some would argue that 4K is too dense at the screen size, and then 1080p is definitely stretched a bit too thin at 27 inches in my opinion. So it's really just a question of whether you have the GPU horsepower available to drive 1440p at those high frame rates. And here's where the 27GP850 gets really good, and that's when we talk about response times. Somehow, IPS panels just keep getting faster and faster, with this new panel from LG looking very impressive when it comes to motion clarity. We've got 4 response time settings here. From slowest to fastest, they are off, normal, fast, and faster. Fast looks like the best setting to use here, with a bit less ghosting on the trailing edge of the UFO, and overall it does look really good for an IPS panel. The faster setting should probably be avoided though, with a bit of inverse ghosting, but nothing too major. Here's how the fast setting on the 27GP850 looks compared to the 240Hz FI27QX from Aorus, and the best setting to use there, which is called balanced. And I'd say the two look very close. You could really make a case for either one, and honestly both feel about the same when it comes to responsiveness. What I'm really happy to see here though is a pretty solid implementation of backlight strobing, which typically monitor companies just cannot get working to a usable level. The FI27QX's implementation of this, for example, is an absolute joke. I mean, just take a look at this, it's not usable at all. Here though, it is totally usable, and most of the time testing this monitor out through some competitive games, I did have this enabled and was pretty impressed. Zowie still have the best backlight strobing mode in my opinion, with Diac Plus on at the 1080p XL2546K, which is what I'm using these days for competitive shooters, but realistically the LG is not too far behind. Not to mention, at a very similar price, the LG has significantly less compromise, being a larger 1440p IPS display, whereas the Zowie is more of a one-trick monitor for competitive shooters. Hz. Now the screen does dim quite a bit while using the motion blur reduction mode, but it is still usable, topping out at around 212 nits. So again, this was definitely bright enough towards the end of the day, or if you game with your windows closed, but if you game in a bright room, feel free to disable this mode, and there the brightness tops out at 380 nits. The white point of the display, out of the box at least, is a bit on the cooler side at 7500 Kelvin, which is pretty typical for most gaming monitors. If you want something closer to the 6500K mark, you can use the warm 3 color temperature mode, and you can find that in the monitor's menu. We're also looking at excellent color performance here, close to 95% of DCI-P3 coverage, 100% of sRGB, and 92% of Adobe RGB. And at a price point of $500 US, I personally feel like that's pretty reasonable in the current market. 240Hz options currently come in at around $700 to $800, so it's really up to you to decide whether you're going to pay that extra $200 to $300 for an extra 60Hz, which above 180Hz is definitely going to be less noticeable. It's potentially worth it for games like Counter-Strike, Valorant, Rainbow Six Siege, those games that you can easily drive to high frame rates. Potentially the extra 60Hz is worth it if you're a really competitive player, but for games like Warzone, Apex, potentially lower frame rate games as well, the 180Hz is absolutely plenty. That's especially in Apex actually, where you'd be capping the game below 190 FPS anyway to avoid the game engine stuttering, so 180Hz is almost a perfect fit here. I'll also mention that Gigabyte's M27Q is also a pretty popular 170Hz option at just $310 US, although looking at some reviews, the ghosting is quite a bit worse than this new LG. So really there's a lot to love here with the new 27GP850, and my only real gripes again are when it comes to the ergonomics. I just wish that the stand didn't poke out as far and that the height adjustment just went a little bit lower, but realistically I don't think that's going to bother many users. Response time performance and the motion blur reduction mode is what surprised me the most here. These IPS panels are just getting really fast. Overall, the 27GP850 is a super versatile gaming monitor that gets a lot right, and if you have the GPU horsepower on tap, driving 1440p gaming at 180Hz looks incredible. So as a replacement to the 27GL850, this gets a big thumbs up from me, and I'll leave some links down below for you guys if you are interested. So as always guys, a huge thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe down below if you haven't already, and I will see you all in the next one.